Let's do it. Evening ticket style. It is a Wednesday. College hoops. We need it. It's time. The season is here. Got some major upsets. It seems like January, we've seen a whole lot of upsets. To be honest with you, from the beginning of the season, nobody wants to hold on to that top 10 spot.
Hmm.
So we'll go over that. We'll find out maybe there's something bigger to this. And of course, as always, when things are wide open, is there possible for a long shot or make some good money come March, or for people right now who are wagering on all things college hoops? There's a lot of us out there. As always, I'm Sean Brace, joined by Ryan Coyle, Beef himself. Let's talk some college hoops. Ryan, how we doing, sir?
Pretty good. Like you said, pretty crazy. Couple past few days, we've had some major upsets. Tennessee and UNC both losing last night. Tennessee a double-digit home favorite. And then this upcoming Saturday, Sean, I mean, we're getting into February now. This upcoming Saturday and Sunday, we got 4 top 10 matchups this weekend. So loaded slate coming up this weekend, and going to answer a lot of questions, I think, about some of the ceilings of these teams.
Yeah, we'll definitely jab at those games coming up on Saturday. Always enjoy the big picture stuff. And, it's a weekly update for me. And I will be upfront with you. I started watching a hell of a lot more college ball detailed. Now, I've always been jabbing, always been tuning in, since December. I mean, going back to those tournaments, right?
Hmm.
Because of Nova and all that. So I've been watching. It's just, it's another thing to really focus on who's playing, where the rankings, who's on top of the conferences, who's got possible to be not making the tournament, all that. So a little bit more detailed, but I always enjoy the weekly catch up. So let's not waste any more time. Got some big picture questions for you. Let's start off with what I asked you about as far as the upsets we've had, man. Let me pull these exact stats up. Let's see here. This was from ESPN earlier today. 55 losses by AP top 10 teams, most in the season prior to February in AP poll history. What's going on there? And as I said, does this open things up in your mind come March?
I think it's more and more of the transfer stuff has kind of evened the playing field a little bit. I mean, we're talking right now at 8:12 on Wednesday night. Purdue might lose by the time we're done recording this. By the time this plays tomorrow, but Purdue and I think UConn have separated themselves as the two top dogs in the sport. But you look at a lot of other teams across the country, like Tennessee. I know they just lost last night to South Carolina, but they've been a top 5 team all year, and their best player has been a Northern Colorado transfer. Like the
Wow.
playing field is not kind of where Kentucky, they have a bunch of high level recruits, Duke bunch of high level recruits, but you're getting these kind of mid-major transfers that are 22, 23 years old, and they're coming up and they're playing against a bunch of freshmen, a bunch of guys that are seasoned veterans at the college level. And I think it's kind of evened out the playing field a little bit, where in the past, all right, you look at a game like last night with Tennessee, all right, they're going to get some higher recruits than a South Carolina team that is going to get the lower level type of SEC recruits, but the playing field's a little bit more even now. So I think it's, in all honesty, good for the sport. We've seen like Purdue teams in the Big Ten, Purdue and Illinois, 2 of their best players have been transfers from the Missouri Valley Conference. So it's kind of cool to see those guys and develop and what they've become at the higher level of college basketball. But like you said, too, it's going to open up for, I think, some more upsets come March, because some of these top level teams aren't really as dominant as they look with that number next to their name in the top 10.
Well, let me press you on that one, because there's only a few markets open, or a few options open in the market of conference winners on DraftKings Sportsbook. Spit it out, Sean. Pac-12 is the one that really would catch my attention, but of course we got the West Coast, so we'll come to that. But we'll start with the Pac-12. Arizona minus 290, Colorado plus 650, Oregon 7-1, Utah 18-1. Possibility that we see Arizona get knocked off as far as the regular season is concerned.
Yeah, so the only reason why these are the only 3 you can take right now is just because these other conferences have games going on at the moment. So, barring any changes. But Arizona, I think, has a pretty comfortable lead. They've never lost back-to-back games with Tommy Lloyd as the head coach there. So they had a tough loss on Thursday night against a really bad Oregon State team at the buzzer, but then they went and they handled Oregon on the road. Like, they're a team that's shown the ability to respond. And the Pac-12 is a super weak league. Like, Pac-12, Sean, on Selection Sunday, Arizona might be the only team out of the conference to make
Wow.
the tournament. If not, they're going to have probably some guys playing in that first 4 game in Dayton. Just a really down year for the league. So I don't think it's worth it taking a stab at anyone else just because Arizona too, the way the Pac-12 is designed, you get your Thursday and Friday game, you get them home at back to back, and then on the next weekend you'll go on the road. So I don't see Arizona dropping 2 consecutive games at home with the home court advantage they have.
Makes sense. Now, Big Ten's down this year too. Like, how many teams are coming from the Big Ten? If you mean to tell me Pac-12 and Big Ten are probably going to give what maximum 5, the under on 5, right? Wouldn't you, as far as both of those conferences together?
Pac-12 and Big Ten combined.
Yeah.
No, I mean you got Wisconsin, Purdue, Illinois. Those are 3 locks. Then you got
Okay.
Northwestern looking more and more like a lock, and then
They
you're
win the
going.
night.
What'd you say?
It's if they win the night too, right?
Yeah, that would be their second win over Purdue, and they
Wow.
also just beat Illinois, who was a top 10 team last week at home. Then you have Nebraska is right there in the mix. You never can rule out Michigan State still, and then Indiana's kind of hovering around. Minnesota too. I mean, Minnesota's a weird team. They're the best team in the country against the spread, 17-3, but
Mm.
they're only 13-7 straight up right now. So the Big Ten too has an opportunity for one of those teams to potentially be a bid stealer if someone can knock off Purdue. But I would take the over of 5 for sure because I think Northwestern is like a 95% chance getting in. So I'm looking at 4 locks in the Big Ten right now and a lock in Arizona. And I think you're going to get at least one more out of the Big Ten and potentially one more out of the Pac-12 with like an Oregon, a Utah, a Washington State. Teams like those are hovering around.
Excellent. Izzo, you think he's going to retire? Or you think he still coaches after this year?
From an article that came out on CBS Sports about 2 weeks ago now, he said that he's not going to retire in 2024. But he also said when he does go out, it's going to be like a Jay Wright, Saban type thing where just one random day he's like, all right, I'm done. But it does sound like he's going to be coming back for at least one more year. But he is one of the coaches that has really expressed the disinterest, I guess, in the changes and the way that he has to coach nowadays. So, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if it comes in the next year or two, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be after this season.
Excellent. All right. Talking to Ryan Coyle, of course, the evening ticket. We came up with a new name here, the evening ticket. So all things college. As far as the national championship, and we're a ways away, and of course the bracket hasn't even been drawn up. We don't even know who the 1 seeds are. Just curious. Let me jab you with this one. How many teams do you think have a realistic possibility of winning 6 games? Is it 6 games in a row and cutting
Yeah.
down the net?
I mean, I definitely say Purdue and UConn. I throw North Carolina in there. I actually got North Carolina about a month ago at 28-1. They're down to 13-1, and they're coming
Mm.
off a bad loss last night to Georgia Tech, but they had the chance to right the ship on Saturday against Duke. I really like the Kentucky team. Their talent-wise, I think this is the best Kentucky team Cal's had within the last 5 to 6 years. But another team where their defense, I don't know if it's really going to translate that deep. I do like Houston as well. And I still like Marquette. They were my preseason national title pick. They're 30-1 right now. So if you want
Mm.
to take a stab on them, they've been playing a lot better. Tyler Kolek, the probably first team All-American point guard, I'd say by the end of the year, he's been playing a lot better. He almost had a triple double last night against Villanova. When he struggled in kind of the middle of the season, they were playing poor basketball. They were dropping games that they shouldn't. But they're at 30-1 right now. That's a pretty nice ticket to get with some good value for a team that has a lot of experience. They only lost one guy from last year, and last year they were a 2 seed. They got bounced a little bit early to Michigan State. But when you think about that, this is a team that's coming back with pretty much everyone from last year. So Marquette there at 30-1. I think that's a good value. If you want to look at a few maybe other dart throws, Baylor at 35-1, just because they can really score the ball. If they can defend a little bit better, I think that they could be thrown in there. And then a team that I think is really flying under the radar. I'm not saying a national champion, but potentially to make the Final Four is New Mexico. They play tonight against
Ooh.
Boise State. A little bit of a difference is they probably have the best mid-major home court in college basketball, home court advantage. So obviously you have to play away from that. But they're a team that's been on a roll, dominating teams by double digits, and the Mountain West is really strong this year. So if you're looking at a dart throw, potentially they're 80-1 right now. So I know DraftKings gives some of those like no sweat bets. Maybe throw in a parlay if it loses and put put that on New Mexico because they're a team that certainly could make a run as well.
Marquette just entered 7-1 Final Four. So I like that. Of course, you got to sprinkle a little bit on the champion at 30-1. No doubt about that. Of course, coming into the season, everything you just said. Kid's from Rhode Island, right?
Yeah.
Kolick, isn't he from Rhode Island?
Yeah, and then he went to George Mason and transferred out to Marquette. But his just swag and confidence, like, just did you watch the Villanova game last night?
Yep.
Yeah, he was giving it to him, and it just he feeds into that stuff. Like when Marquette is being kind of doubted, like they were last year, they were picked to finish dead last, I believe it was in the Big East last year, and they won it. Like when they're playing kind of in that underdog role, I think that's when they thrive more. And right now, everyone's just clapping up and praising UConn. Don't be surprised if a team like Marquette goes in and eventually wins like the Big East tournament, and then they're rolling into March Madness with all the momentum.
Yeah, just as far as UConn, they're a wagon, as they say, and picked up right where they left off from last year. A quick one from last night, though, South Carolina, and I know that they've had a couple wins in a row here. That was a surprising result. They look really good, man. They look big. They got some length. Looked like Tennessee's got some shooters, but that was an impressive victory for South Carolina. What was your takeaway on that?
Yeah, South Carolina is another team too, another money printer, 16-5 against the spread. And so the kind of backstory with them, with Lamont Paris, who's the head coach, he is probably the favorite, I would say, right now for coach of the year in college basketball. But he was a longtime assistant under Bo Ryan at Wisconsin. So if you remember those teams, they were slow it down, physical. We're going to beat you in the 60s type of team. And you saw that last night against Tennessee. That's what he's kind of molded this South Carolina team into. And South Carolina last year, terrible. One of the worst Power 5 teams, Power 6 teams, for college basketball. And they had G.G. Jackson. He was the number one recruit. He was a one and done. And now this year, they've been a much more team-centric type of basketball squad. Last year was a lot of just give him the ball and let him go. Like you said, they got big dudes. They're tough, and they're a physical bunch. 18-3 now. I don't think it's to the point in the season, or I think it's at the point in the season where you can't say, this is a fluke. Like, this is a team that is going to be right up there by the end of the season for that SEC title, at least knocking around for it. So definitely a team looking like they're going to be going to the tournament, but also a team where have no guys with experience. So I'm interested to see how they kind of finish out this stretch, and if they let that high horse get a little too above them with wins over Tennessee and Kentucky now in the past 10 days. But South Carolina, definitely one of the stories of the year.
All right, Beef, let's talk a little bit about Saturday and the matchups that we have. I got it right up in front of me right now. And, of course, the granddaddy of them all, Duke and North Carolina, no doubt about that. I want to end with that. I'm curious. Let's start with Kentucky and Tennessee. I just watched Tennessee. Impressive, but to me, I think Kentucky, of course, should be favored. They will be favored. They're at home. What's the number you think?
I think it's going to be 1.5, 2 probably.
Ooh.
Kentucky also plays tonight against Florida. So, I mean, I think the result of that game could dictate that spread as well. They're missing 2 5-stars tonight, DJ Wagner and Justin Edwards. Edwards been a bit of a disappointment, but DJ Wagner's been a very good player for them this year. So interested to see if it makes an impact tonight, and if either of those guys are able to play Saturday too.
All right. And next game up for the Saturday card here. Let's talk a little bit about Houston and Kansas. So let's go to that game. That's at 4:00.
Mm-hmm.
Kansas just beat down Oklahoma State, if I'm not mistaken. Houston, in a little tight. This one taking place in Lawrence. Where are you at in this one?
Yeah, so I put out a video, I think it was last week, where I said I'm not buying long-term stock in this Kansas team. They really only have 5, 6 guys that you can consistently count on to give you minutes, but like they're relying on a 5-star El Marco Jackson is his name, and he was kind of looked at as like a scoring guard. He doesn't even shoot the ball. Like, this is a team where if Hunter Dickinson, Kevin McCullough, DeJuan Harris, any of those guys get in foul trouble and are forced to miss time, they're going to struggle. Like, I think they're probably going to be a 2 or 3 seed come the tournament, and I think they're a squad that will not make it past the first weekend. I think they're going to get kind of nipped off by one of these teams from the high major level that kind of has struggled throughout the year. They're going to get like a poor seed, but then their talent's going to be able to overtake this Kansas team where that isn't that talented of a bunch. It's never smart to go against Bill Self, but I'm just not buying into them much long term. However, Saturday I will though. You're stupid to ever pick against Kansas at Fog Allen Fieldhouse. I think the stat is that Bill Self has one more conference championship than losses at home in his entire tenure there at Kansas. So they're pretty much an automatic lock each and every year to win those home games. Houston has a really tough bunch, as we've seen from them the past few years. Physical, going to defend, but you can't pick against Kansas on that home floor. Very intrigued to see that number, though, because Houston's like number one in all the metrics and kind of the projections that make the spread. So that should be a close one. Maybe like Kansas 1.5, 2.5, I think, when it comes out.
All right. And then, of course, at the end of the night, well, 6:30, Duke and UNC. And UNC just coming off a tough loss at Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech played them really well. David Stoudemire actually beat both of these teams in Georgia Tech, correct? Didn't he beat Duke earlier this year?
Yeah, that's crazy. First year head coach there already beat Duke and UNC. It's pretty awesome.
So both teams really good, 3-7 here. UNC with the third, seventh ranked Duke here. Game being played in Chapel Hill. I would lean towards UNC, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that Duke goes in there and knocks them off, correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's the annoying part kind of too with college basketball, where it's like, if this was our college football show, we already have the number in front of us. So we don't know what the number is actually going to be. I'd say UNC -3, -3.5. But yesterday was a typical, fall flat spot look ahead game, because UNC coming into yesterday, they had won 10 games in a row. Then, you got a Georgia Tech team that you should be able to beat. Spread was a little weird though. It was only 8.5, 9 at most books. Then you look at a team like Tennessee was like 14.5 point favorite. So it was a kind of a bit of a weird spread, but they were due for a loss as well. Now put that behind you. It doesn't matter. You got the Dukies coming to town. I think this is the 49th time where the two of these schools have met each other as both top 10 opponents. So obviously one of the top 10 games of the year in college basketball every single season. I wouldn't put it past Duke, like you said, to go in there and win. We've seen it before. Teams go on the road, most notably UNC going to Duke at Coach K's last home game. But then also that crazy Austin Rivers step back three was at UNC. So we've seen the road team go on the road and win these games. But I'm a big fan of this UNC team. I think the other night was just a bad spot for them. I think they will get the win on Saturday night.
Yeah, it's hard to argue. I think UNC will do all right at home. But again, like you said, just with the rivalry, anything's possible, and Duke is very talented. Quick question on Duke. Was that a foul at the end of that Clemson game in your mind?
I thought that was one of the worst calls of the season. A typical Duke call.
Wow.
Say what you
Wait a
want.
minute. Wait a minute. You're a shooter too. First of all, let me ask you this. It should have been on the floor, right? He got fouled, but it was on the floor.
I think it was he launched himself into him trying to create the contact. It was one of those plays where the shooter flailed, trying to sell the call, trying to get the
I
call.
think he got fouled before that.
I'd have to see
Would
it
he
again, the clip, but
were they
watching it live where I was, I didn't think that was a foul whatsoever.
do you think they were in the bonus?
I assume too. Yeah, I was gonna say I
Yeah.
assume too at the end of that late in the
Okay.
game that they were probably in the bonus.
Yeah. I was watching that. That was right before my Wings game, so I wasn't able to catch it in great detail. But was watching it and just was cracking up. I thought it was a foul. But you could be right. We are seeing that. I saw some people complaining about with Pat Bev and Steph yesterday. Pat Bev
Mhm.
goes crashing right into Steph, and it was right in the beginning of the game. Steph's hands were up. He couldn't do
Yeah.
anything. But Pat Bev launched himself into it. I don't know. It's not an easy gig as far as refs are concerned. But awesome, dude. So this weekend, college hoops. Right now, as we're recording here on Wednesday night, Purdue up by 2. We're under a minute. Game being played in Purdue. Northwestern with the ball.
Yeah,
Getting dicey there.
Purdue was a 12.5 point favorite going into this one. And then at 8:30 you got UConn 13-point favorite versus Providence. So we'll see if Purdue's able to close this out by the time the show's out on the air tomorrow.
Purdue has already lost. As a matter of fact, I was talking about that from this January back on the 9th. Who'd they lose to? They lost to they were highly ranked, and they ended up losing to, sorry, let me pull this up in my notes. Purdue or Nebraska, excuse me, when they were at Nebraska. So
Mhm.
now this will be they'll be added to the list of AP top 5 teams to lose to unranked teams. Now, Northwestern is ranked, correct?
Not right now. No, they're 15-5, not ranked.
15-5.
They're probably like the 26th team in the country right now.
All right. Well, we'll see how this one plays out. Looking forward to the night's game, of course, with UConn, and then back at it with that major card on Saturday. Ryan Coyle 35 is where we can find you in all things socials. Going live with Tansy, sounding great. Loving that. You two big heads, college basketball brains.
We call it the Sickos podcast.
Nice. The Sickos podcast. It's got a ring to it. Let's get a graphic.
Yeah.
Ryan Cole, you the man. Good luck on all your plays. We'll catch up next week.